David's hands trembled as he stared at the data that could end galactic peace forever. 2 species. Both absolutely right. Both utterly incompatible. And 48 hours to prove that some problems weren't impossible, or watch the galaxy burn. The holographic displays floating above his desk painted a picture that defied 15 years of mediation experience. Beings of pure electromagnetic energy who dance between dimensions, locked in existential conflict, with silicon-based hive minds that built reality one calculated structure at a time. The station hummed around him, vibrating with the tension of 1,000 different species trying to coexist in recycled air that still smelled faintly of ozone. Still staring at those files? Jimmy Wells burst through the door, coffee in hand and optimism radiating from every pore. David didn't look up. The Veltan think individual consciousness is just temporary energy arrangement. The Korvak see every Veltan pulse as a direct attack. So we find middle ground. There is no middle ground, Jimmy. David's voice carried the weight of too many sleepless nights. They literally can't exist in the same conceptual space. The Korvak's mental resonance gives the Veltan what they call existential vertigo. Jimmy perched on the desk edge, his brown eyes still bright with 28-year-old confidence. But that's what makes it interesting, right? The challenge? The challenge is that when I fail, not if, when the committee declares the peace protocols insufficient for galactic stability, the office door chimed. Kelvar entered with the measured precision that came from being bred for war but choosing diplomacy instead. His reptilian features showed nothing, but David had learned to read the subtle color shifts in his neck scales. Today they showed deep purple. Trouble. Big trouble. Gentlemen. Kelvar's bow carried just enough of the old warrior salute to remind everyone what came before peace. The protocol committee has made a decision, and? David's stomach already knew the answer. This case will not be treated as standard mediation. Should you fail, the committee will vote to abandon the peace protocols entirely. Jimmy knocked over his coffee. The brown liquid spread across the desk's metal surface, pooling around data chips. They're talking about going back to the old ways? My people have a saying, Kelvar said, his scales deepening to almost black. When the mediator fails, the warrior returns. I thought that saying had died with the last generation. David pushed back from his desk and walked to the viewport. Outside, merchant ships from the Altanian collective navigated around a massive Thermin crystal hauler, while tiny Bendari scouts darted between them like minnows around whales. Each vessel represented a choice made decades ago: talk instead of fight, negotiate instead of conquer. All of it balanced on David's ability to do something no mediator had ever done before. How long do we have? Preliminary contact begins in 6 hours. If initial interaction cannot be established within 48 hours, the committee votes. Jimmy set down his coffee with shaking hands. David, what if we really can't do this? What if some problems really are impossible? Kelvar's scales rustled with concern. Dr. Ross, your people's gift is not perfection. It is the willingness to carry impossible contradictions without breaking. Perhaps that is what this situation requires. David felt something shift in his chest, an idea forming in places too deep for conscious thought. Show me the preliminary contact protocols again. Jimmy pulled up holographic displays, his fingers dancing across controls with the kind of nervous energy that came from knowing everything depended on getting the technology right. Standard approach would be separate chambers, translation matrices, controlled interaction. No? David turned back to them. We've been thinking about this backward. We're trying to make them compatible when maybe the incompatibility is the answer. Kelvar's scales rippled through colors David had never seen before. Explain. What if we don't try to bridge the gap? What if we accept that they're both right, and the solution lies in holding the paradox? That doesn't make sense, Jimmy said, still mopping coffee with his sleeve. Exactly. It doesn't make sense to us. But maybe sense isn't universal. The intercom crackled. Dr. Ross, control here. The Veltan delegation has arrived. They're requesting contact with, quote, the pattern holder who shapes meaning flows, end quote. David stared at his reflection in the dark viewport. 43 years old, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before the Eltanian mediation had nearly killed him. But somewhere behind the exhaustion, something else looked back at him. The part that had always been drawn to impossible problems precisely because everyone said they couldn't be solved. Tell them conference room alpha in 2 hours. Jimmy, start working on direct consciousness bridging protocols. David, Jimmy's voice went quiet. That's never been tried with species this different. The neural feedback could kill you. Then we'll know something new about the universe. David gathered up the scattered data chips, careful not to let his hands shake where his friends could see. And if I'm going to fail anyway, I'd rather fail attempting something that's never been done. Kelvar stood and performed the slight bow that, among his people, indicated respect for someone choosing a dangerous path. If the warrior must return to the galaxy, Dr. Ross, let it be because the mediator dared too much. Not too little. Conference room alpha crackled with energy that bypassed normal senses and spoke directly to something deeper. Jimmy hunched over his interface array, data streaming across multiple screens. Consciousness bridge is calibrated, but David, this is seriously experimental. Best case, mild disorientation. Worst case, complete personality dissolution, which means your mind gets stuck trying to exist in multiple incompatible states simultaneously and just breaks. David checked the interface headset. The galaxy needs to know whether the peace protocols can handle truly impossible situations. Better to find out now. The chamber's systems whispered as the first delegation arrived. 12 Korvak entered in perfect synchronization, individual bodies, moving with the unity of a single mind. Their silicon-based forms gleamed like polished stone. We are present for required interaction, they spoke with one voice. This equipment configuration serves what purpose? Direct approach to understand your perspectives more clearly. Concern, individual consciousness patterns incompatible with collective processing. Risk of damage to single-mind entities. The air shimmered. The Veltan didn't enter so much as become present electromagnetic patterns pulsing with thoughts too rapid for human perception. Greeting, song harmony to pattern shapers. Their voice crackled like lightning. Shall we dance? Speak? Merge in the spaces between thoughts? Alarms chimed softly. The Korvak stiffened as energy pulses registered as aggressive probing. The Veltan patterns flickered chaotically as mental resonance created painful discord. Stop! Both of you, step back. Jimmy checked his readings. Neural interference is off the charts. They literally can't share conceptual space. What if that's the answer? David activated the interface headset. What if we don't try to make them compatible? David, this is insane. Human brains aren't designed to hold contradictory realities. No, human brains are designed exactly for that. We do it constantly. Love and fear, hope and despair, individual desires, and collective needs. What makes us good mediators isn't logicits, that we're comfortable with paradox. The interface activated. David's world exploded. Through the Veltan connection, existence became pure energy, the universe revealed as endless electromagnetic dance, each consciousness a temporary eddy in cosmic flow. The Korvak appeared as dark voids where energy went to die. Simultaneously, through the Korvak interface, he felt the satisfaction of structure thoughts building with mathematical precision. The universe revealed as vast construction project, each consciousness a node in expanding meaning. The Veltan appeared as chaotic, static, threatening reality's careful architecture. Both perspectives were absolutely true, both completely incompatible. David! Jimmy's voice cut through psychic chaos. Neural activity is spiking. I need to shut it down. No, I'm starting to understand. The dispute isn't about mining rights at all. Through dual interface, he saw the truth. The system existed in quantum superposition simultaneously solid planets to the Korvak, and pure energy flows to the Veltan. Each species could only perceive their version, but both existed in the same space. How can solid things claim to own energy? The Veltan asked, distress rippling through David's consciousness. Individual thought. Sparks cannot comprehend permanent structures. The Korvak responded, certainty solid as bedrock. You're both right, David said. words feeling like they came from someone else. And that's why this is impossible. The room fell silent, except for station systems humming. The universe is bigger than any single perspective can hold. 36 hours remaining. David's quarters felt smaller as he sat trembling from consciousness bridge after effects. The dual interface had left him with peculiar double vision, seeing both solid reality and energy patterns flowing through the same space. Kelvar sat in his specialized chair, scales deep blue with contemplation. They'd been processing in companionable silence for an hour. "Your coffee ritual?" Kelvar said suddenly. "I observe it but never understood the purpose. Minimal physiological benefit for energy expenditure. It's not about caffeine, it's about the pause. Choosing to stop and do something serving no practical purpose except connection. Some things are worth doing just because they make us feel more human. My people would call this inefficient. Efficiency isn't the only value worth optimizing for." David rubbed his temples. "Kelvar, can I ask something personal? We are companions, in purpose. Such questions are appropriate. Why did you really object to the consciousness bridge?" Kelvar's scales shifted through colors before settling on muted gold. "Among my people, individual consciousness is precious because it is solitary. To share minds risks losing boundaries that define self. Your willingness to dissolve those boundaries for understanding." He paused. "It conflicts with every evolutionary instinct. But you supported it anyway. Because I have learned that human instincts often prove superior to Skith instincts when the goal is peace rather than victory." The door burst open. Jimmy entered without permission, usual enthusiasm replaced by panic. "David, we have a problem. 3 other impossible cases just got declared unsolvable. The Thermin-Altanian trade dispute, the Bendari territorial conflict, and," he swallowed hard, "the Nexus colony situation." Blood drained from David's face. Nexus colony involved human colonists. If that failed, humans might be expelled from the peace protocols entirely. How long? Emergency vote is tomorrow. If we can't prove impossible, cases are solvable. Jimmy sat heavily on the floor. "David, what if we're wrong? What if some conflicts really are impossible?" "The galaxy has existed for millions of years on might makes right," Kelvar said, scales showing purple concern. "Peace protocols represent barely 50 years of experimentation. Many see current events as proof that cooperation is temporary aberration." David began pacing, consciousness bridge effects helping him see patterns from multiple perspectives. "What if we've been wrong about mediation itself?" "What do you mean?" "We assume successful mediation means finding solutions all parties accept. But what if the real solution is teaching everyone that some truths are larger than their ability to comprehend them?" Kelvar's scales cycled rapidly. "Explain this concept." "The Veltan and Korvak aren't fighting about the mining system. They're fighting because each can only perceive part of reality bigger than their frameworks can contain. The system exists in quantum superposition, both energy and matter, depending on observation. That's impossible." Jimmy said automatically. "No, that's human." Silence as implications sank in. Humans routinely held contradictory beliefs, lived with paradoxes, accepted multiple truths. Other species considered it flawed reasoning. But what if it was humanity's greatest strength? The galaxy doesn't need perfect mediators. It needs mediators who can be wrong and right simultaneously, who can hold impossible truths without breaking. Jimmy's eyes widened. "You're talking about throwing out everything we know about conflict resolution?" "I'm talking about admitting what we've always known. Human mediation works not because we're better at logic, but because we're comfortable with contradiction in ways other species literally cannot comprehend." "Dr. Ross." Kelvar stood, towering over the humans. "If you propose what I believe you are proposing, it will change not just mediation but fundamental understanding of consciousness relating to reality. Maybe it's time." David's communicator chimed urgently. He read the message twice. "The Veltan and Korvak have requested emergency session. They want to meet together, same space, with direct consciousness bridging for all participants." Jimmy's face went pale. "That could kill everyone in the room. or save the galaxy. Kelvar performed formal Skith battle, decision acknowledgement. Then we prepare for the impossible. 18 hours to judgment. The emergency assembly hall had never hosted anything like this. Representatives from 47 species filled the curved amphitheater, breathing apparatus and gravity adjustments creating a symphony of technological adaptation. David stood at center, consciousness bridge interfaces arranged like a meditation circle, while holographic displays showed the watching galaxy that this moment would determine peaceful conflict resolution's future. The proposal defies precedent, announced Councillor Seren of the Thermin Collective, crystalline body resonating with concerned harmonic tones. Direct consciousness sharing between incompatible species has never been attempted on this scale. Jimmy worked frantically at his station, sweat beading despite perfect temperature control. David, neural load calculations are off the charts. Attempting to bridge 47 different cognitive architectures could cause permanent damage to everyone, which is why we're not going to try making them compatible. Confused sounds rippled through the assembly clicks, harmonics, electromagnetic pulses, untranslatable bewilderment. Clarification requested, the Korvak Collective intoned. Previous statement lacks logical structure. Confusion pattern detected, the Veltan pulsed. How can bridge exist without connection points? David activated the central interface, feeling familiar tingling. But instead of trying to translate between perspectives, he did something against every protocol. He stopped trying to make sense. You're asking me to choose who's right. The Korvak see the disputed system as solid matter with defined boundaries. The Veltan experience it as flowing energy that cannot be possessed. You want compromise that makes both perspectives compatible. Hundreds of different consciousness types focused on his next words. But what if you're both right, in ways that only look contradictory from inside your own perspectives? Impossible, the Veltan responded, energy patterns showing distress. Truth cannot contradict truth. Then maybe truth is bigger than any one perspective can hold. He activated the full interface array not to translate between species, but to demonstrate the human ability to exist in multiple contradictory states simultaneously. Through the consciousness bridge, every delegate suddenly experienced what David experienced: reality as wave and particle, energy and matter, individual and collective, temporary and eternal. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Several species cried out as logical frameworks tried processing impossible contradictions. But David held steady, consciousness becoming a living example of paradox acceptance. This is what humans do. His voice somehow reached every species despite different auditory mechanisms. We hold contradictory truths without needing to resolve them. We love and hate the same person. Hope for the best while preparing for the worst. We're logical and emotional, selfish and altruistic, wise and foolish often simultaneously. Through expanded consciousness link, delegates began experiencing not just David's perspective but each other's. The chamber filled with strange harmonics as dozens of cognitive architectures encountered unimaginable viewpoints. The solution isn't finding middle ground, David continued. Consciousness spread across so many awareness types he barely felt anchored to his body. It's accepting that the system exists in quantum superposition simultaneously, matter and energy, individually owned and collectively shared, depending on observation framework. Kelvar's voice cut through psychic chaos, scales showing colors David had never seen. Dr. Ross, you proposed temporal spatial sovereignty rotation. The Korvak manage geological timeframes while the Veltan govern electromagnetic cycles. Not just that, Jimmy added, technical enthusiasm overriding worry. The system works better with both perspectives actively maintained. Contradictory observations create stable paradox states more resilient than either perspective alone. This arrangement violates logical ownership principles. The Korvak strained. Yes. And it also fulfills them perfectly. You maintain permanent structural authority over matter-based resources, while the Veltan exercise constant sovereignty over energy flows. Both get complete control in different dimensional frameworks. The chamber erupted in cacophony as dozens of species tried processing implications, stretching cognitive abilities to breaking points. Several delegates demanded recess, others began urgent consultations. A few sat in apparent meditation, consciousness overwhelmed by concepts too large for normal thinking. But gradually, new sound emerged, harmony occurring when multiple perspectives found resonance without requiring agreement. Neural feedback is stabilizing, Jimmy reported with wonder. Distributed consciousness load is decreasing as more species accept the paradox framework. Counselor Seren's crystalline form chimed with frequencies translating as amazement. The human proposal suggests reality itself benefits from maintained contradiction. This concept will require significant philosophical adjustment. Which brings us to the larger question, David said. Consciousness slowly consolidating back to normal human parameters. Peace protocols were designed to find solutions everyone could accept. But what if some solutions require accepting that acceptance itself is paradoxical? Silence, except for life support humming and dozens of species breathing, thinking, existing in ways David was beginning to comprehend. Are you suggesting all mediation should incorporate paradox acceptance? Asked Ambassador Thylex of the Altanian Computational Collective. I'm suggesting humans can teach the galaxy something we never knew we knew. We're not the best mediators because we're more logical or fair. We're effective because we're comfortable with contradiction in ways other species literally cannot comprehend until now. The vote was unlike any in galactic history. Instead of binary approval or rejection, the Assembly created experimental adoption with paradox protocols. Peace protocols wouldn't just continue, they would evolve to incorporate human-style contradiction tolerance as fundamental mediation feature. As delegates filed out, many stopping to thank David or express bewilderment, Kelvar approached with scales, showing deep gold satisfaction. Dr. Ross, you have changed not just mediation, but consciousness itself. My people will need decades to understand what occurred here. David smiled, feeling more human than he had in years. That's okay. We've got time to figure it out together. 6 months. Later, the new Galaxy Unity Station had transformed into something defying every previous diplomatic model. What had been modest facility for careful alien interactions had become sprawling complex where controlled chaos was actively cultivated. David stood in the new Paradox Training Center, watching the first graduating class of interspecies mediators practice impossible techniques. Remember, he told 23 beings representing 14 species, the goal isn't eliminating contradiction, it's maintaining it productively. Let paradox exist. Hold it gently. A young Thurman student raised crystalline appendage, harmonic voice carrying confusion overtones. Teacher David, my cognitive structure experiences pain maintaining contradictory concepts. Is this normal? Completely normal. Your mind is expanding beyond original parameters. Discomfort means you're growing. Kelvar, now wearing formal paradox instructor robes, approached with patient precision. Student Lyra, may I suggest a Skith technique? We learn to hold contradictory war strategies simultaneously. Your pain is similar to muscle strain during physical development. But how do you function with contradictory strategies? You discover contradictory strategies create more options than singular approaches. Prepare for attack and defense simultaneously. Plan for victory and defeat with equal commitment. Minds holding both possibilities respond faster to changing conditions. Jimmy emerged from technical section, hair disheveled but eyes bright with successful problem-solving satisfaction. David, new consciousness bridge arrays are online. We can handle direct experience sharing for 50 different cognitive architectures with safety protocols that actually work. Any breakthrough side effects? Actually, yes. Species completing full paradox training report, enhanced creative thinking, improved emotional resilience, and, Jimmy checked notes, something Altanians describe as computational joy. Which means they're having fun with complexity instead of being frustrated by it. Soft chimes indicated important visitors had arrived. The delegation entering represented what would have been unthinkable months ago, former enemies working as partners. Veltan energy patterns danced harmoniously around solid Korvak forms, both species somehow occupying the same space without conflict. Greeting, song harmony to wisdom. Teachers? The Veltan pulsed. Report with excitement. Joint discovery achievement requires sharing celebration. Gratitude expression for paradox education received, the Korvak added. Joint project results exceed all prediction models. We're honored by your visit. Jimmy mentioned you've made some discovery. Demonstration preferred over explanation attempt, the Veltan replied. Korvak activated holographic display showing the disputed system where rotating sovereignty had been implemented. Instead of expected mining operations and energy collection, the display revealed something unprecedented: structures existing simultaneously as matter and energy, following both Korvak engineering principles and Veltan flow dynamics. Contradictory observation methods create stable paradox fields, one Korvak explained. These fields generate energy patterns existing only when both perspectives are actively maintained. Jimmy leaned forward, technical fascination overriding diplomatic protocol. You're saying cooperation is literally creating new forms of reality? More than cooperation? The Veltan responded, patterns brightening with excitement. Synthesis through maintained opposition. Universe truth, larger than single perspective, can contain. The student becomes the teacher, Kelvar observed, scales showing deep gold satisfaction. Your discovery proves the fundamental principle. Reality benefits from conscious embrace of contradiction. David felt sudden perspective shift, as if the universe had revealed another layer. You're not just solving conflicts anymore, you're demonstrating that consciousness and reality interact in ways we never understood. Correct assessment, the Korvak confirmed. Request submission, expansion of paradox methodology to other systems showing impossible conflict potential. With joint species teaching to demonstrate maintained contradiction benefits, the Veltan added, we accept, on one condition, specification requested, we do this together. No single species takes credit, no one perspective dominates. If we're teaching the galaxy that consciousness can reshape reality through embraced contradiction, we need to model that principle in everything we do. Veltan patterns pulsed with harmonious agreement while Korvak performed formal alliance, acceptance gestures. As the delegation prepared to leave, David walked them to the center's main viewport. Outside, space around Unity Station showed new reality they were creating together. Ships from dozens of species moved in patterns looking chaotic but functioning perfectly, each vessel following its own cultural logic while contributing to larger harmony emerging from managed contradiction. Dr. Ross, Lyra approached, crystalline structure now chiming with confident frequencies. May I ask a personal question? Of course. Do you ever regret changing everything? Making the universe more complicated than before? David watched a Skith patrol ship perform complex maneuvers around a Veltan energy formation, both species somehow occupying the same trajectory without conflict. Lyra, I don't think we made the universe more complicated. I think we finally started seeing how complicated it always was. Jimmy joined them, tablet showing latest applications for paradox mediation training. David, we just received requests from 12 more species, including the Andromedans. Word has spread beyond our local galaxy group. Kelvar approached with scale showing colors David was still learning to interpret. Dr. Ross, my people extend formal invitation. Skith High Command wishes to host the first intergalactic symposium on productive contradiction. David laughed, sound carrying both amazement and acceptance of impossible possibilities. 6 months ago, I was trying to prevent one war. Now we're planning intergalactic conferences on how to fight better by not fighting at all. The universe appears to have a sense of humor, Kelvar observed. Or the universe has been waiting for someone to finally get the joke, Jimmy added with a grin. Epilogue. The new harmony. David found himself back in his original office, looking at files for the next batch of impossible cases. But instead of feeling overwhelmed by unsolvable conflicts, he felt energized by the possibility of discovering new ways for reality to surprise them all. Peace protocols had evolved beyond anyone's imagination, becoming something not just about preventing war but teaching consciousness itself to grow beyond perceived limitations. At the center, Humans had found their true galactic place note as conquerors or followers, but as teachers of the radical idea that being right and wrong simultaneously wasn't a flaw to be fixed, but a feature to be celebrated. We used to think mediation meant finding middle ground, David said to the empty office, practicing words for tomorrow's new students. But sometimes middle ground is empty space. Real mediation means helping everyone find higher ground. Outside his window, stars looked the same as always, but David knew everything had changed. The universe was bigger than any single perspective could hold, and for the first time in galactic history, conscious beings were learning to hold it all together. Through embrace of impossible contradictions, the galaxy had discovered that truth wasn't singular, it was symphonic. And humans, with their chaotic, contradictory, beautifully paradoxical minds, had become conductors of a cosmic orchestra where every voice mattered, every perspective had value, and the music emerging from their differences was more beautiful than any harmony they could have achieved alone. The universe, it turned out, was not only big enough for everyone to be right, it actually worked better that way.